Hello again and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Now today's engine is a very interesting one that dates back to 1983, and it is one of the smallest four-stroke engines ever designed and mass produced. And it is the HP 21 VT engine that was originally designed and manufactured in Austria, but then eventually came to the United States. Now in this video, because of the ease and simplicity of removing and replacing the bearings, I'm actually going to do most of the disassembly of the engine on camera also, just so that you can see the interesting design features of this engine. So with all that said, let's go straight to the table and replace the bearings in this engine. Okay, so here on the table I have this small little HP 21 VT engine. Now this is a rotary valve four-stroke engine, and it has many unique design features. One of them, as you can see, is this forward-mounted carb that faces downward like this, which I've already loosened this carb mount up, so I'm going to go ahead and just take the carb off. And it also has just a very small exhaust, which I believe I've got loosened up, and I should just be able to unscrew here. So as I said, this is a rotary valve engine, in that when this crankshaft turns, there's a drive shaft here and bevel gears in here that we'll see that actually turn a rotating drum here, and this rotating drum actually just has one port that goes between exhaust, intake, and it just rotates around like that. So to disassemble this engine, I'm going to take the head off. I don't have to take the head off to do this bearing replacement, but I want to do that just to show you the design features. And then it's got a split crankcase where there's just these 6 screws on the bottom. So let me go ahead and just loosen up these 4 screws here, and we'll take the head off, because this is an engine that I picked up very inexpensively from a Facebook Marketplace deal that was on a plane. So I've even got an airplane that's suited for this size engine as we speak. Now this engine had been sitting in a hanging from somebody's bar or hobby shop, I don't recall which, for many years. It is a used engine. It was run before, as I could tell by smelling it, but it's been many years. So that's why I'm going to take it all apart and clean it and replace the bearings on it. Okay, so I think those will come out now. So here is our head is removed, and there are shims that are in here that add as spacers. There might actually be another one in here. So you can see as I rotate this thing around, I think I'm going to take this glow plug out real quick, and you can see there's the glow plug mounts to the side of the engine also. So let me take that out so that we don't have any compression as I rotate this through, and you can just see I'm rotating it backwards because I've already loosened this drive hub, so I can't spin it like that. But you can see here how that just kind of just rotates like that, and this is that drive shaft gear. So now when I take these 6 screws out here, this whole top part of this engine is going to come off, and that's where we access all of the internals of this engine. And yeah, I knew that gasket was bad. I've got more gaskets on order for that. Okay, as I said in the intro, these engines were designed and developed and marketed and sold out of Austria. Sometime in the 2000s, when the company went out of business, I assume they went out of business, a company in the United States called Mikoa, Model Engine Company of America, bought the rights to these engines and many others. And now this particular one is actually saying it's a made in the USA version. And Mikoa still actually produces or manufactures these engines and all these parts for these engines. So that's always kind of a nice thing too. I'm going to go ahead and take this prop nut off and the prop washer. And then I've got all the screws out. Now we just have to separate the crankshaft here from the crankcase halves. And there you have it. So this upper head and this rotary valve does this pop right out, comes out. I'm not sure that I'll be showing that. But here's the internals of this engine. It's pretty dirty, but you can see that the piston just kind of rides in here. And here's that bevel gear that engages in that shaft that actually rotates the rotary valve around. You can see how the piston is cut out here to ride over the bearing like that. So to replace these bearings, all I have to do is just lift this thing up and out of the crankcase like that, take the piston off. Now this piston, you can see how dirty that case is, features a Dykes piston ring. And a Dykes ring is one that just sits in an L channel at the very top. It's not recessed down from the top of the piston at all. And here's our bevel gear that comes off, and I have to make sure not to lose, there's a spacer or a washer there. And I have to take that thing off right there. Because as you can see, this crankcase is rather filthy, and I'm going to go put this in the ultrasonic cleaner and clean it up. I got to make sure that there aren't any other small parts that are going to come off in there. I don't think there are. I'm probably going to have to pop this rotary valve out off camera also. But so to the bearing replacement portion of this, here it is. Here's the bearings on this crankshaft, and I think the best way for me to possibly remove that front bearing is use this little puller here. Give this a shot. I don't know that I've ever done this with this little puller before. It's usually just used for pulling those drive hubs off, but it looks like it might do a pretty good job of pulling this bearing right off of here too, because it felt like it was kind of tight, but that bearing came right off. So now this bearing, it might be a little bit tougher. I'm probably going to have to actually use my hammer and a punch to get this little bearing off of here. Now I have not heated this thing up at all, so we'll see how easy this is going to come off. I might actually have to heat it up. Yeah, so it looks like I'm going to have to go and put a little bit of penetrating oil on this and heat this up to get this off. So let me pause the camera here real quick and we'll get that rear bearing off. Okay, I've heated this thing up a little bit, put some oil on it. Hopefully that'll be enough to get this bearing off of here. And there we go. Okay, so that was a little bit tougher than I thought. And there you have it. Now both of these bearings are off this engine, and now I can clean all these parts up and we can do a quick bearing installation. Okay, so here I am. I've got all these parts cleaned up. I've cleaned up the majority of the parts, and I've got the top piece here, the cylinder head and lower crankcase, and I've put this little bevel gear on here. Now I'm going to differ from some of my normal procedures a little bit in that today, instead of using Boca's Lightning Lube Road Power as a lubricant oil for reassembly, and because of the interesting construction of this, I'm going to use Boca's Lightning Lube high-speed oil. And the high-speed oil is nice because actually it's an excellent product, but it also has this very small needle applicator, so I can use it to, you know, just kind of put oil right where I want it. And I've done that, and that bearing, that little bevel gear just came off again. And I'm going to do the same thing with this piston. Just kind of apply some of that oil in there and on this connecting rod. Same thing here. Go ahead and lubricate this crankshaft up. I like this lubrication oil also. I don't typically use it for this, but I'm not pressing bearings in, so I feel really comfortable using this just for this application here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm still going to lubricate the bearing surfaces, but since there's not being press fit into place, and like I said, it's just a change of pace. So Now to finish up the bearing installation of this portion here, let's look at this Boca bearing kit that came for this specific engine. And the kit number is an ENK-019HP kit. Now this is a high performance bearing kit. That's what the HP stands for. And I saw something that looks a little different than normal when I looked at these initially, in that this front bearing that came out was fully sealed, rubber sealed, and the rear bearing as usual is completely open. So likewise, this front bearing is fully rubber sealed, nothing to do there. This bearing, however, looks a little bit different than I've ever seen before, and I'm going to deviate from my normal process somewhat here, because this has got one of these phenolic races on here. So in essence, I believe, this bearing just looks different than any other Boca bearing I've ever seen before. So it doesn't feel like a rubber sealed, it looks like just the bearing race itself. And of course this front shield looks very different than what I've seen in the past. And quite honestly, I'm not real comfortable going in there and taking this front seal or front shield off, just because it doesn't look like it. It looks like a stainless steel shield, and I don't want to go in there and mess something up that shouldn't be messed with. So I might end up getting another bearing set, or at least another replacement bearing like this. But for the time being, for this engine, I'm going to install these bearings just as they are. And over the course of a few runs, if it doesn't seem right, then I'll swap this bearing out. But for now, I'm just going to leave that shield in place, because I've never seen one that looked like this before, and to me it just looks like a different material, and it doesn't look like one that should be removed, in my opinion. So here's the bearing installation for this engine. There you have it. We're done. Basically, that's exactly all there is to it. Now, I'm just going to put the piston on here, set this in place. Now there is a cutout here for that piston to ride in that bevel gear. And that's basically all there is to it. Now, the only thing there is left to do is just kind of slide the top housing on and put it together like that. Now I'll time the engine by putting the rotary valve in there the way it's supposed to, but I mean, that's essentially all there is to installing the bearings in this engine. Now it's just a matter of throwing some screws in there and finishing the reassembly of that engine.